dream of independent way of acting, because we are not freed from our routine, and we have what are called the outbursts and impulses driving us from action to action. For example, anger and hatred, malice and jealousy, they drive us into action, and we will be like a dog driven by a fellow by the chain. Anger will be our master when we act out of anger. So, anger will be the master of a dog in the name of the person who acts angrily. Like this, the impulses drive us from action to action, and we live in bondage. And then we have many sorrows and sufferings in life. We are forced to live in a miserable condition without independence of action, because when our impulses are binding us, how can we have independent action? When our mind is filled with anger, are we free to be happy? So we lack freedom and we live in bondage. When we are jealous of someone else, can we sleep properly? We are not permitted to sleep, and thus we have no independence of action. So we are expected to break this routine and come out of the bondage. Nature makes us feel the pain of our life, and nature makes us understand that life is painful, and it makes us feel that we have to escape from this bondage and come out into a new horizon, because our original state was independence and not bondage. We are born into this world from an unlimited state of consciousness, and we are born into limitations. It is but natural for us to try to come out of the limitations. That's the reason why everyone wants to be happy, because happiness is the natural state of existence, whereas we make our life a life of self-conditioning, away from the natural way of living. What's the difference between a child and an adult? A child is privileged to be happy without any reason, whereas 99% of the grown-up human beings want some reason to be happy. That's why they are always unhappy. If we want to find a reason to be happy, the reason has no reason to be with us, and nature has no reason to provide us with a reason to be happy. And the one who can be automatically happy without any reason is the only one who can live happily in this world. And a person who seeks reasons to be happy or reasons why he is unhappy is damned to live in unhappiness only. He is a self-condemned fellow. Suppose I say, I am unhappy because of this man and that woman. They are not allowing me to be happy. He is an unfortunate fellow, because he never allows himself to be happy. There is no one in this world who stops us from being happy. We ourselves condemn us by not caring to bring the three parts of the machine to focus, not being able to select a work which is meaningful. The work we do will be obligatory, because the word we use does not belong to the work we do, and the thoughts we think do not belong to either our words or our work. This is the difference between a child and a grown-up fellow. It is the duty of every grown-up fellow to remain a child continuously throughout the life, at the same time growing in wisdom and knowledge. Age should give us experience, wisdom and knowledge, but it should not give us the restriction from being happy. And it all depends upon how we choose our work. See, the child chooses to be happy and jolly. Even while weeping, he is happy because he is independent and he prefers to weep if he wants to weep. And is an adult independent to weep if he wants to weep in the society? He is not so free to weep as the child. That's the way George Bernard Shaw remarks that men laugh because they can't weep. For example, when we have a slip and a fall on the ground, when something pains here, we get up and smile because we are not independent to weep. The child, if it gets some injury or pain, it is very sincere in thought, word and deed. He can weep because it is time to weep. So, we cannot understand what happiness is. That's why we think that weeping people are unhappy and smiling and laughing people are happy. Many times it is far from truth. It is away from truth, because we see people smiling when they are in great distress and nervousness. We find people laughing, nervous laughter, when they are helpless and they are suffocated inside. If you take them into loneliness and ask them what is the matter and begin to console them, they burst out into weeping, because that is the true state in which they are existing, whereas they conceal it inside and put forth an ugly, nervous laughter, which is opposite to the nature of the laughter of the child. That's why the laugh of a child is most beautiful and delightful. The smile of a child is most delightful, and even the weeping and crying of a child is lovable and most delightful, because it means what the child means, whereas even the laugh of a sickly, nervous elderly person gives us unhappiness and a tragic effect, because we feel very much for the person who is suffering inside and laughing on the lips. We can understand how much he is suffering inside, because he has denied his own expression out. This is the one aspect where strong people take care about themselves. They begin to practice truth speaking as one of the devices of bringing the machine into focus, to bring all the three parts of the machine into focus. This is the best process to follow, and the most scientific process to make our work significant is to begin to speak truth. But we are afraid, damn afraid of speaking truth out, because we wrongly believe that it is very, very inconvenient. We deceive ourselves by thinking, but there are many inconveniences in trying to speak truth. In believing so, we live in a very, very inconvenient state of life daily, a painful life of tensions and complexes in the mind, and we go into involvements and difficulties than to begin to speak truth. We do not understand the simple truth that when we begin to speak truth, life becomes simple and straight, and all the involvements will disappear, and it is the only way to live happily. But many people do not prefer to live happily, and they want to live happily, but they do not prefer to live happily because they do not follow the path to live happily. If you go into the details of the yoga practice, yoga in its true sense, called the Eightfold Yoga Path of Patanjali, the very first step, first of the 8 steps includes truth speaking, and not only truth speaking but also truthfulness. Truthfulness is something more than truth speaking, because If you take a cassette of tape recorder and reproduce the speech you have made, it reproduces exactly, including our cough, but you cannot call it truth speaker. Can we say that the cassette is speaking truth? Because real truth speaking includes truthfulness as an attitude. Truth more exists in attitude than in speech. So, the wise student of yoga begins to practice truthfulness as an attitude. And incidentally, he begins to speak truth. The capacity to speak truth can be got only by having the attitude of truthfulness. It includes the relationship with others. When we begin to have the attitude of truthfulness to others, then we will be able to speak truth. And when we make the required training for truth speaking, it may take some time, only a few months and not more than that. Because within those few months, we have to break up some of our obligations with others. Sometimes in the beginning, we do not know the art of truth speaking. We will be very harsh in the name of truth speaking in the beginning. And some people are mistaken that truth speaking is harsh always. They are proud of declaring that they speak truth though it is painful to others. That means they are still fools. They are just in the beginning of trying to speak truth. That means they do not know how to speak truth. Elderly people teach us that truth speaking is always sweet. One of the instructions of truth speaking among the scriptures is like this: speak truth, speak pleasant, do not speak truth unpleasantly, and do not speak untruth to be pleasant. These are the injunctions of truth speaking. And he says, this is the way how the experts speak truth. They make truth palatable and pleasant. Just as medicine can be made sweet, for example in homeopathy, any medicine can be made sweet. So also you have the art of making any truth palatable and pleasant to others. And if we begin to speak truth in this way, we develop to be truthful, then the work we do differs from what we were doing previously. We will be free from the routine way of doing the work, and we will be free from the obligatory way of doing work. The change will be like this. Previously, we will be doing what we want to do, and we are always unhappy. And after the practice of truth speaking, we know what we have to do. The change takes place. The daily routine takes another direction, and our work becomes more meaningful. Just as the sensible worker in an office or in a factory differs from an irresponsible worker. So, a person who wants to do what he wants to do differs from a person who does what he has to do. Now, this fellow will have no obligatory work with anyone. He will be working and he will be playing. He will play with his work. and the difference between work and play will be removed in his life. He continues to live as a child, and his work gives him only pleasure, and there is no monotony in his way of working, because there is one essential difference. The first fellow is bothered of the result of what he does. He is bothered of the result. He does anything for the result. And the second fellow is not at all bothered about the result. He is devoted to the work aspect and not the result aspect of his work. At first it may appear unreasonable to you, but I will give you an example. You see a sincere student going to appear for examinations, reading and reading and reading the lessons again and again, but he finds it very difficult to memorize his lessons and reproduce in the examinations. Whereas the same student, if he makes a pleasure reading of a storybook or a novel, just easily and carelessly, even while going in a train or a bus, he remembers the whole story in all its detail, and he can easily reproduce when asked why he finds it so very difficult to remember his lessons, while he remembers the story very easily. The reason is the examination going student is bothered of the result. When his mind is on the result, it cannot be properly focused upon the reading. Automatically his reading is always out of focus, and it is very difficult for him to remember his lessons, for the simple reason that he wants to remember. He remembers always that he has to remember the lessons. So the idea of his results comes in between himself and the content of the textbook. There is the idea of his result which interferes with his reading, and automatically he can never remember his lessons. Here, a boy reading a storybook for himself voluntarily, it is not obligatory for him because he is doing it voluntarily, and he has no idea or intention to remember it. Therefore, there is nothing between his mind and the book, and automatically he remembers. So, the more he wants to remember, the more he forgets it, and the more he reads it directly, the more he remembers it. This is one of the secrets of work. If the student can be indicated by the teacher or the patient or the parent about this, if you are sensible enough to just indicate this to the student, he can be saved from great trouble and misuse of energy because of out of focus. And the same is the case with the work of these two fellows. A person who practices truthfulness in life, he will have his work done without any obligation. It is a voluntary business to do his work. What is the difference between a businessman working in his own office and an employee working in the same office? The businessman finds it a pleasure to do his own work in his office because the business belongs to him. The employee finds it difficult to work because the work belongs to someone else. This difference in feeling the sense of work makes all the difference. It makes life a failure to the fellow who cannot focus the parts of his machine. Throughout the life, he lives a life of drudgery and fatigue. He may be placed in a very high position in society. He may be earning about $5,000 or $6,000 a month. He may be enjoying many privileges in his office, but he feels a hell of his work, and he is not at all interested, but he is forced to do his work. But when once this change takes place in the person, he will have what is called devotion, and then work with devotion, it it will be a play and not work. When we study the lives of great saints and yogis and the holy people, we will observe how they led their lives. They led their lives as play and not work. The work they choose for themselves is what they mean to do and what they have to do, but not what they wanted to do. That's the difference. If we want to do something, we may not be fit to do that something, and the result is we may have obstacles on the way. Suppose I am by nature and temperament a professor, but I want to do some business. Automatically I will be a failure, because I want to do something which I am not expected to do. We should find the piece of work which is in tune with our own nature, and we should be independent enough to choose that part of work which we are expected to do. We should have the independence to choose our work in the world, and then the work becomes a solution to our own life, and automatically it leads us to the goal, that is freedom and liberation from self conditioning. We should be able to do the work without an idea of the result, and then the work is bound to give best results. The more we are bothered of the result, the less will be the quality of the work we do, and then the poor is the result we produce. So result will have inverse ratio with our intentions about the result. The more we are interested in the result, the worse will be the result. The more we are interested in the work, the better and better will be the result. This is another secret of work. And those who are bothered of the results, let it be business or employment, they are the worst failures in life. And the more they fail, they are more bothered about the results. And the more they are bothered, the more they begin to fail. We should be out from this vicious circle. And unless we know this secret, and unless we can train the mind not to remember about the result, we cannot have a perfection in doing our work. I will give you one example. Take a fellow who is driving his car from about 2 weeks. Since 2 weeks, he has learned driving very recently. He is very careful about his driving, and with great attention he will be driving. He is nervous of his driving. His hands and legs are fully involved in his driving. His eyes and mind are fully involved in driving. Very, very careful only to mind the driving and nothing else. And if you are sitting by his side in his car and ask him some questions, he grows restless and nervous. He says, "We can talk after stopping the car. Now don't disturb me." And take the example of another person who is driving his car for the past 30 years in Brussels. You can talk to him sitting by his side in the car, and he will be conducting happy conversations, answering whatever you question, and maintaining a very pleasant mood and cutting jokes with you. And is he driving the car? He is not driving.
No.
Driving is done through him, and he is not driving. The first fellow, he is driving with all his strength. And what is the difference in the quality of driving? We have the worst experience of driving in the first case. We too grow nervous along with the driver, because at every step we fear an accident, because it is anything except driving. We find some nonsense and some nervousness in the name of driving. In the second case, there is no driving at all, and automatically you will get down from the car without remembering that your friend was driving. What's the difference? In the first case, he is driving. In the second case, he is not driving. His legs are driving and his hands are driving, but he is not driving. His eyes are driving and he is not driving. His mind is driving and he is not driving. What is he doing? He is sitting calmly in his own cabin, enjoying what he wants to enjoy, enjoying the conversations with his friend. And whenever he wanted to play a joke, he is playing a joke with his friend. The difference in the quality of driving of these two fellows will be the difference in the work of these two fellows in life. The second fellow automatically reaches perfection, and even though he is active throughout the day, he is not doing anything. Work is done through him, and he has no fatigue in doing his work. His body has no exhaustion of doing his work. Even before retiring to bed in the night, he is as fresh as he was in the morning. Whereas with the other fellow, he is always fatigued. Even in the morning fresh hours, the fellow appears like a hell with a fatigued Saturnian face, because he has the sense of doing work. Always he feels self-pity of what he does. He thinks to himself, see how much work I am doing. This makes him do the minimum work with maximum exertion, and the quality of work is worst, because it is anything but perfection. He can never reach perfection of his work in his life, because unfortunately he is conscious of his work. Whereas in the second case, he is not at all conscious of what he works. He is conscious of his playful mood, and automatically he is a friend and guide of everyone he knows. His presence is a pleasure to everyone, whereas in the first case, his presence gives fatigue to his friends. This is what the scriptures teaches about the secret of work. It is not the quality of work we select that makes us happy. It is not true that a type of work gives you happiness and another type of work gives you unhappiness. It is utterly false to believe that a piece of work will be pleasant and another piece of work will be unpleasant. But it is your art of assembling the three parts of